All right. Good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast. Good afternoon also to those of you on the West Coast. Welcome to Uncanny X Chronicles, the X-Men 97 unofficial podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Choi, also co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. And thanks for joining us and being with us each week as we talk about each of these episodes from season 2 of X-Men 97. Also, we'll have a special guest joining us, as you guys well know, as we do each week. So stick around for that. But before we do that, of course, I want to be able to dive into just a quick rundown of what happened over the episode for this past week, of course, being the season 2 finale. So if you give me a moment, I will hop right into that. And then, as I said, I will introduce our guests and we'll hop into some analysis and some theories. So here we go. So getting into the recap of episode 9, titled Survival of the Fittest, it picks up where Gambit was left unconscious after the seeming defeat of Apocalypse commandeering his newly transformed horseman body. Cable and his X-Force team, now allied with X-Factor, make their way to the X-Men at their X-Corp compound to eliminate Gambit, believed to still be housing the consciousness of Apocalypse. In their efforts to separate Gambit from Apocalypse, a trio of the X-Men, Nightcrawler, Beast, and Rogue, specifically seek out Apocalypse's vessel known as SHIP to determine a way to eliminate any traces of Apocalypse once and for all. Back at X-Corp, X-Force and X-Factor engage in their battle on the X-Men in hopes of reaching and eliminating Gambit. Meanwhile, inside the Celestial Shrine, Rogue makes the ultimate sacrifice as she is temporarily provided celestial power necessary to defeat Apocalypse. Back at X-Corp, the battle between the trio of mutant teams continues as Gambit wakes from his coma and enters the chat. The chat, of course, being the battle royale between all of our mutant teams. Eventually, everything comes to a head when Cable is able to get past X-Men to Gambit when he shoots them, seemingly killing him. However, in doing so, he's able to play right into Apocalypse's hand as his consciousness, that being Apocalypse that is within Gambit, is unleashed as a result. What follows is Apocalypse's dismantlement of participants in this mutant battle royale mentioned just prior, except Xavier, who Apocalypse attempts to torture when he takes over the other mutants present to close in on Xavier. However, the celestial empowered Rogue drops in just in the nick of time to exorcise Apocalypse out of Gambit, trapping him in an orb, which, of course, the orb traces back to the moment that we had with Apocalypse to gifting a portion of his power to External earlier. But now in the orb, Rogue hands off the orb to Cable. Now, providing Cable as, I guess you can say, the guardian of Apocalypse's essence. Now successful in her mission to save Gambit, Rogue awaits her fate only to learn that Nightcrawler sacrificed himself at the Celestial Shrine so that his sister could live on. By the episode's end, we are on course, treated to a bittersweet ending as Gambit is back with the X-Men, safe and sound, but forces elsewhere are, of course, brewing, as they always are, as Graydon Creed is revealed to be elected as the new president, and Mystique has infiltrated X-Factor as Valerie Cooper, seemingly killing the original. So with that brings us to our season finale. And I wanted to introduce today's guest. Today's guest has produced, written, directed, and acted in a number of award-winning indie films. The first being the indie hit horror comedy, The Night Watchman. The second film being the award-winning horror comedy, A Comedy of Horrors, Volume 1, which was written, directed, produced, and starred in by today's guests. Of course, I would be remiss not to also mention their project, A Town Called Purgatory, which they also started and produced. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show Mr. Ken Arnold. Let me bring him on now. Ken, hello, sir.
How you doing, Brandon?
Good. Glad to have you on. I know we don't talk about it a whole bunch. We talk about it offline a lot, but I'm glad to have you on the show because I know that you are entrenched in comic lore as well, sir.
I have been a comic fan for many, many years. I started buying them when I was 12, and I just love it. I mean, I love the X-Men. They're my favorite. Of the books that I have, that I own, the majority are X-Men, Wolverine comics, and different characters throughout the X-Men universe.
For sure. So, just to dive into just initial impressions, what were your thoughts on this season finale before we get into like the nitty gritty of analysis and theories?
Well, I got to tell you, the new series, X-Men, the 97, the one that just, the last two seasons, way different than the one back that I watched when I was in my 20s. It's way different. It's more gritty. It's got more it's got more meat to it, is kind of, if you understand what I'm saying there. It's got more involved, and I got to tell you, the series has been fantastic from beginning to end. This season was great with the Apocalypse storyline, and the last episode was fantastic. I mean, how it all came together, how and we all know what happened to Nightcrawler at the end. He's one of my favorites, and I was sad to see him go, man. That one hurt. That one hurt a little bit. I can't hear you right now, Brandon.
Here we go. There we go. Yeah. Overall, like they were, I think it was a good season. I am going to be honest that I did enjoy the first season more, and I'll give my reasons why as we get to the end. Okay. As to why that is, but no, overall, a decent second season, a good second season, but I definitely have my things to discuss in terms of things to tweak for season 3, which I know is very much on the way. So, but getting into some of the analysis, I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of the things that seem to be prevalent in this episode. There were some things that I feel like over a couple of episodes were like revisited again and again. The idea of fate, or are we truly able to change our fate, our future? But I feel like in this episode, it very much comes down to what we have in the title, as well as some of the themes that are represented by some of the characters. I mean, we have the idea of being, I guess you can say, ruthless, which goes into the idea of survival of the fittest, which is very much a mantra, of course, of Apocalypse. But some other ones that come into play too, with Rogue, when we have that idea of love that we had with the Celestials, and that was something that convinced them to provide her or imbue her with some celestial power to defeat Apocalypse, but also what was necessary with Nightcrawler in the idea of faith also, and that being something that convinced them to allow him to step in as a sacrifice for Rogue. So what are your thoughts on those, respective qualities that we saw among the characters?
Well, to start with Nightcrawler and his faith. I mean, throughout the history of the X-Men world, he has always had great faith in anything, in the Bible, in the Lord, in Jesus Christ. He was that was his way. And for him at the end, when he gives himself up and he sacrifices himself, he understands it's not the end for him. He is going on, and he's going to go walk with the Lord now in heaven. As a Christian, that's what you're going to do. And he has lived a good life. He has done the right things, or for the most part, he has done that. And of course, anything that he may have done, which was a sin, he can atone for. And in the presence of God, he will be allowed into heaven because, you know, Jesus died for our sins. So
Yeah,
you knew that that was the case when he was sacrificing himself. He knew,
for sure.
you know, he knew when he got there, I'm going to give myself up. This is not the end. It's only going to get better for me from here. And that's why he did what he did out of love too. Of course, it's his sister. You know,
Yes.
I do the same for my sisters as well. So, but yeah, Rogue sacrificing herself because that's what she thought she was doing.
Right.
You know, she was like, I'm going to do this. She didn't have that same faith as Nightcrawler, but she did have faith in the fact that this is my journey. This is who I am. This is, you know, I'm going to give myself up and everybody else is going to live and Apocalypse is going to be defeated. So she knew that as a hero, as, you know, she knew that that was where her path led her. And then she got there, temporarily was given the power. I wasn't sure, you know, as I was watching, I was like, is that power going to stick with her? You know,
Right.
As it might come back as a residual kind of a thing throughout going into the future. I wasn't sure about it, but you know, temporary or not, she was able to use the power to defeat Apocalypse. She didn't know that her brother was going to do that, so she thought she was sacrificing herself. So, and that in and of itself is huge because, you know, she was doing it for everyone. You know, like not just the X-Men, but for everyone in the universe. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
you
know, when we talk about comic books, it's the universe. It's not just Earth, you know, because Apocalypse could, you know,
Well, I was going to say the thing that has been, well, first, let me, you know, I'll comment further on what you had to mention about Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler is such, which is why he's one of my favorite X-Men, and it's a very, I feel like it's a really, you talked about the idea of having meat on the bone, right? And I feel like in terms of whether you're writing the character or if you're acting as that character, it's a very juicy role, or in either case, whether it's something that you're writing what he's doing, or you're acting as that character, because he's such an idea of an interesting idea of contrast. He's a religious character, but his appearance would tell you otherwise, that he would not be a religious character. He's so far, you know,
he looks like a demon, right?
Like a demon, right?
Yes.
So it's so fascinating to have a character who is religious like that, but, you know, has also that dichotomy of his appearance is just the opposite of that. So you already have an expectation of how you perceive him to be when he's far from it. And in the case of Rogue, and I talked about this last week, is you have a character who, it's interesting. We've had this idea of love that is kind of weaved through the entire arc of this season, and we even have mention of it where they kind of what's the word, they allude to it earlier in the season, and the idea of love being the thing that's going to, you know, allow them to defeat the big evil that is coming at that time, them not knowing that evil being Apocalypse. And in the last episode, when she is trying to save Gambit, and he's in his horseman mode, you have that idea of how love can sometimes blind you to the necessary things that you have to do, even when people are not in their best state of mind, and they're, you know, maybe a harm to, you know, not just to you, but to others as well, because of that love for that person, for that individual. Sometimes you see it sometimes that people make accommodations, and they you know, try to look past things. But when it all comes down to it, at the end of the day, we were able to come full circle to it by this episode, where that was the one thing that gave the Celestials the wherewithal to say, okay, all right, this love thing you keep talking about, you know, we want to give you a shot. It seems like it's something that's fascinating that we want to, you know, observe more of. So we're going to imbue you with a little bit of our power, so that way you can, you know, execute or do what you're trying to, accomplish. So I just found that whole idea interesting, where love can be a very ugly thing, but it can be a beautiful thing too. So and how they were able to do that between the two episodes. Which was really fascinating, because Gambit was going a little bit off the deep end there, and had the X-Men not hopped in there, Rogue would have gone right along gone right along with them. Like they cave in like right in the nick of time before she kind of like went on a
Yep.
deep dive with them. Um so I mean, yeah, a lot of those things have been really fascinating in looking at this episode. But I want to give you the floor. You're the guest host this week. Were there any other themes, and now that we're like at the end of this arc for this season, that have been fascinating in terms of themes that have been highlighted or that you've observed?
The one thing that kept coming back, and Apocalypse kept saying to Xavier, maybe now the teacher will learn. He kept coming back to that, to that. And I just thought, well, what is it that Xavier's got to learn? I mean, he's doing the right thing. Xavier is always trying to do the right thing, in this season anyway. He's always trying to do, and in other things, that might not be so true, but in this season, he was always trying to do the right thing. And, he kills Magneto right in front of him, what does he have to learn from that? And then he continually just kept doing things like that to Xavier to force something out of him. And that was interesting to me, to see him repeatedly do that. He was, like you said, trying to torture Xavier. That's what he was trying to do. And, right at the end, the love part of it with Rogue and Gambit and everything, I thought Gambit was gone. When
I did too.
When Cable shot him, I was like, that's it. He's done. Right.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, that isn't how, Apocalypse's soul or essence or whatever came out of him. And then that enabled Gambit to be resurrected when he came out of him. So, yeah, it was interesting to see that. The love issue was a big thing, but the love for Gambit or the love for the X-Men, the love for humanity as a whole, what was it for Rogue, because you saw her like go through the different things. Sure. I love the X-Men, I love Gambit, but I also love I love human beings, and I don't want to see them all die because of this or become slaves or whatever, under Apocalypse. So
sure,
there was a lot of different ways it could have gone. I kind of had an idea that he was going to sacrifice himself, though. Nightcrawler. I did. I was like, he stayed behind. It's his sister. I had, it had a very parallel thing to in Endgame with Hawkeye.
Oh yeah, sure.
And it was very parallel to that, Hawkeye and Black Widow, right? It was very, very similar.
For sure.
For
sure.
You were all right, well, who's going to sacrifice themselves? And you think he's going to do it. And then it turns out to be Black Widow, So you think she's doing it. Turns out to be Nightcrawler. So very similar.
For sure. So, in thinking, past the themes, of course, now that we're at the end of this episode, we can speculate now of what's next, further down the pike, so to speak. And one thing that keeps coming back to me is Onslaught is coming. Like, for sure, Onslaught is coming. Like, it feels like all the, and I've mentioned this even on other shows, but I'll dig into that ditch a little more and just say I'm for sure that he's coming because of all the pieces that are in play. I've mentioned before, we've had other players within the Marvel Universe that have made appearances, cameos, if you will, to demonstrate that there are other characters outside of the X-Men that exist within that world that they have, that are Marvel characters. particularly characters that appear in that Onslaught arc also, by the way. So I see what you're doing, Marvel. Like, specifically a lot of those particular characters. And then we have a actual landscape right now that would warrant the appearance of Onslaught. We just mentioned the idea of Magneto dying, and Professor X witnessing that, and the trauma of witnessing that. We now have the idea of the most the worst person to have as a president, like an mutant character now being president. So, you're going to have all of these policies that are going to just further frustrate Xavier to no end. That's going to further push him in that direction. And yeah, like it just seems like they are just setting the groundwork for that. And the only other reason why I mention that is Apocalypse has his part to play in that story too. And now that we know that he's kind of trapped in this orb, we know comics, no one stays dead forever. No one stays in prison forever. And so I would imagine now that Cable is the guardian, so to speak, of Apocalypse, that it's going to be, maybe a uncomfortable truce that he may have to make with Apocalypse to potentially take on Onslaught, which is part of that arc with Onslaught, where Apocalypse plays into on a tail end of it.
He's gonna have to release him to defeat him. That's what's gonna happen. I mean, that's where it's going. That's definitely where it's going. What I found interesting at the end was, Mystique is going to be Val Cooper, right?
Yes.
In X Factor, right? So, and there was theories that she was already Val Cooper.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
There was that theory. And now that we kind of know that she is, how does that play into how Val Cooper, X Factor deal with the X-Men? And you know what I mean?
And I'll take it a step further. When in the timeline did it happen? I mean, they did it as a button scene at the end of this season, but there's no telling. At the beginning of next season, they can say, yeah, we did this as a button scene, but timeline-wise, it happened far earlier. So she actually was Valerie Cooper the entire time.
Yes. Of course they could, but
we still don't know.
Yeah. That's interesting.
But I was going to say another thing, and this is, again, going back to the idea that characters don't stay dead, or what they can do. We don't really, I mean, we have gotten a appearance of this character in live action, but we haven't really dived deep into the heritage there and the parentage, if you will. But we might be able with Nightcrawler now being dead, could bring in Azazel, perhaps. That could be a thing. Or, we could also get into an arc later on with Krakoa. So, you have that too, because you have a lot of that element of mutants being able to get resurrected. So a lot of fun things that they can do. But I've gotten to this. Have there been some other ones that I haven't mentioned that you've thought about that they could be teasing or getting to?
But say that one more time.
I was going to say, outside of the ones that I just mentioned, have there been other ones maybe that I haven't mentioned that you have thought about or thought as possibilities that they might be alluding to or getting to potentially?
Like storylines? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Things that might be coming.
Yeah, that's a tough one because, most of the core stuff that I did was back in the late 80s, 90s, early 90s. Anything after the mid 90s, I'm kind of hazy on as far as, the storylines are concerned.
And it's being rebooted so many times.
Yes, and it gets confusing. It gets confusing sometimes. But, I was always a big fan of the storyline of the Brood, and the Starjammers and that, and that was kind of where I was in the history of the X-Men when I was coming up with the X-Men. So, but I think they already brought the Brood in one of the earlier the episodes.
Yeah,
this
one of the
season,
episodes they for sure did. Yeah.
yeah, they had them there, and Wolverine turned into one. They, and they had to bring him back, and yeah, so that would have been interesting. I don't know where it's going to go with the Brotherhood coming in. If it's Mystique and she's got the Brotherhood, Apocalypse is such a huge character. Like,
Yes.
is he Thanos level? Close, right? And maybe he is. Maybe he is the equivalent of Thanos in the X-Men world, compared to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But the Brotherhood of Mutants, how is that going to play? Is it going to be that big of a dilemma? I want to say next season, with just them fighting the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Is it going to be on such a grand scale like Apocalypse was? Maybe. I don't know, because that's the tough thing. You fight Apocalypse this season. How do you top Apocalypse in the next one? You know what I mean? And then you got to keep up in the game. And it's the same thing with the MCU. What are they doing? Now, they were going to go with Kang. They scrapped that. And then, boom, Doctor Doom. All right. Now, how do you up from there? Once they defeat Doctor Doom, because they're heroes. They're going to. We all know that.
Yeah.
And we're going to lose. We're going to lose some heroes along the way. That's going to happen. But they'll defeat him. But then what's next? How do you up it? How do you get it? I don't know. How do you up it next season? I can't say. I don't know. I know the Brotherhood's coming. Mystique's coming. She's going to be leading.
Yeah. And Brotherhood's for sure coming, because I mean, I wasn't able to sit in on the panel, but I do recall seeing what they showed. They did show the members of the Brotherhood. I guess kind of getting to what you're talking about is one thing that will be interesting. If Mystique, is infiltrating the government, will she legitimize the Brotherhood? Like, will she bring over Brotherhood members to be, similar to what's happening with X Factor, and actually bringing her own team members over to be legitimized as members, of the government, working for the government? That would be interesting.
Maybe.
So yeah, for sure on that. But getting into your final thoughts on the episode as a whole, if we're getting into like number of X's being how you would rate this season finale, 5 being great, 4 being good, and then 3 being average. And then of course it trickles down after that. Where do you stand with the season 2 finale?
Season 2 finale, I'm gonna go 4.5. Like, it was better than good, but was it great? You could say yeah. If you're really, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the episode. I liked the way it ended. Really, I did, with Kurt giving up his life for his sister. I thought that was a good moment. That's a beautiful moment, right? He sacrificed himself for her, for humanity, for all, for everybody. So
for sure.
And I thought that was a great moment. Sorry to see that happened. Gambit gets to live, and I think Rogue and Gambit, moving on and honoring him in upcoming seasons would be fantastic. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to have the most. I know a lot of people have been like mixed on this episode. I would give it a 4. 4 if I'm just thinking of the episode individually. If I'm thinking of the season as a whole, I'm slightly lower than that. I'm about like 3.5 X's, and that's only because this has been a very, at least in my opinion, a kind of weird, clunky season, where the first season it seemed to have a focused arc of where they were trying to go.
It had a flow.
They were able to get through a lot of arcs, mind you, where like I was giving props where props are due, of like some of the arcs that they had, especially like with Goblin Queen, for example, where a lot of these arcs could have easily been longer, but in terms of how they were able to pace it, they were able to pull I feel like the best parts of a lot of these arcs, and they were able to synthesize it in a way where even though they only spent maybe an episode on it or 2 episodes max on it, they were able to move through it pretty seamlessly. In this episode, or say in this season, it started off very strong. I was really impressed with the 3-episode arc that they had with the 3 teams and the timelines and all of that, and how they were able to seamlessly have all of that come together. But I feel like as we were getting to the middle of the season, it was kind of disjointed in terms of where episodes were. That kind of confused, I feel, the overall arc that they were trying to go for.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree. I did feel that myself, right? In that, I felt like it was disjointed, the jumping around, and then they tried to tie it back together. It felt kind of weird in the middle, but then it came together though for me. So.
Right towards the end, because and you could agree with this, as an actor, as a producer, as a writer, I feel like there was a missed opportunity to follow through on the trauma aspect of losing Magneto that you had at the end of that initial arc of episodes, that they missed the opportunity on. You had an opportunity that you had with the that Danger Room episode, and that Danger Room episode could have been that first episode after we're coming off of Magneto, passing away, because it connected directly to that. Yeah. And then if you wanted to do a side quest, don't get me wrong, I love the Brood, but if you wanted to do this side quest with the Brood, then, have at it. You could do that for episode 5 and episode 6 to, allow us to understand how Wolverine got his adamantium back. But to cut directly from that and hop into a side quest, which, by the way, with some of the characters, they just seemed to pop up and we didn't really understand how they were able to come all together. They just happened to be together, even though character-wise, in terms of their characters, doesn't really make sense as to how they would be able to kind of assemble that way when we all know they hate each other. It was somewhat confusing, and then you had a couple of instances where characters they've done don't get me wrong, overall they've been doing a terrific job of carrying over relationships from the original run of the show, that back in the 90s to now. But I feel like there were a couple of instances this season where they might have forgotten, and I know it's been 30 plus years, but they might have forgotten, or maybe they just decided it wasn't important enough to address certain relationships, like Havoc and Polaris. What happened there? Are they still together? Are they not together? It was such a big
apparently
thing.
Not. Yeah.
The original show was such a big thing, so much so they spent an entire arc of the whole love triangle with Iceman, but yet in this episode, Havoc was like, yeah, okay, you can go. All right, bye. It's and I'm like, okay, even if it's a throwaway of just saying, oh yeah, we broke up a couple of months ago, or we're no longer together or something, but we didn't have anything along those lines. So I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Why would they so seem distant from each other when we were focusing so much attention and energy on that in the initial show? It was literally the arc and the plot of the episode.
I mean, I get it though. I mean, so many things have changed. There's so many different storylines, and there are so many. I mean, I get it.
And they have to quick run through a lot of this when it's not a 20 episode season. I get it, but a throwaway line or something it's, and then the only other gripe was, and this has happened with other episodes, is and this is crazy when it comes to mutants. I get it, and it can be difficult, but the power scaling. You have characters where they're able to do some incredible things, and then, some episodes you're having them do these incredible things, and then other episodes they're having difficulty, fighting certain characters. And I'm like, they could win this battle in a couple of moments if they wanted to. Why are we dragging this out?
Yes.
We Exodus, it was a couple of episodes when he was fighting Nightcrawler. Exodus is incredibly OP powered mutant, and yet we're having a teleporting sword fight with Exodus
Right.
when he can solo the entire team by himself and not even bother with Nightcrawler at all.
Yes.
And then even with Lorna and Polaris, you have a similar instance of that where she could have taken out her whole X Factor team in this episode, yet she was struggling to move pieces of like the wall to take
Right.
each of the team members out. So like things like that where I'm like,
but that happens. That happens all the time. I mean, even in the new Spider-Man movie, that it happened even there. You're like, the Hulk could have took Spider-Man out easily, just and been done with him. But for some reason, Peter can take punches from the Hulk now. I don't know. I don't know. Right? It's so yeah. I understand why they have to do it, because you got to keep the characters. You got to keep them alive. You got to keep. Somebody's got to win. Somebody's got to defeat them. Right. So I guess that's.
But I'm like,
what the thought process
here's the thing. I get all of that, but if you're going to do it, if you don't want to bother dealing with the baggage of what their powers and abilities are, I know this is not a popular thing to say, but just don't have them in it, because people are going to question it. If you do have them in it, like I remember even in talking about the Spider-Man thing is holding the characters accountable for what they're doing. Like, they're basically, taking away people's will to do things, and yet they're able to walk away willy-nilly at the end of the movie versus being arrested. Like you could have still seamlessly had, the X-Men element in place where maybe Professor Xavier got into the heads of those that are in the judicial system and got her off and got her out of jail, maybe, at the end of, but at least we know that she still had repercussions for what she did, in that, versus just going away. The same, in the example of Exodus, you didn't have to. I know you wanted to give Nightcrawler his cool teleporting fight with Exodus of them, the swashbuckling, sword fight, but like you could have still had a great fight, with Exodus taking on the entire team, and it took perhaps everyone there, every morsel of every ability that they had to take him down. Like maybe they took out everybody else initially, but it took all of them to take down Exodus. It doesn't take anything away from the X-Men, because we know that they work together as a team anyway, and it doesn't take anything from Exodus because it allows Exodus to be the awesome character that he is. So I don't know. But still excited to see season 3. But I want to say it was a slight step down for me for this season compared to the first season. The second season. But with that, Ken, as always, pleasure to have you on here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Giving you the floor, can you tell folks where they can find you?
They can find me at Ken Arnold, the actor, on Instagram, Facebook. I have a website, kenarnold.com. They can go there, check out the movies that I've been in, the TV shows that I've been in. They can watch my films, A Town Called Purgatory on Tubi, Night Watchman, it's on Tubi as well. And coming up, Comedy of Horrors will be playing on Tubi.
All right. Awesome. So as always, like I said, thanks to Ken Arnold for hopping on this talk of the season finale, this season 2 finale, that is, of X-Men 97. I'm your host, Brandon Choi. You can find me at Brandon Choi ENT on X, and then Brandon Choi _ENT on Instagram. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be safe out there, and see you guys soon. Bye now.